Welcome back to another episode in our MeteorJS reactive data structure series. We will follow up from our last tutorial on reactive stack, this time implementing a reactive queue. In contrast to the stack, a queue works by the first in, first out or FIFO principle. Just like in the real world, it's the first come, first serve. This makes it a useful candidate for sequential processing. In this tutorial, we will create a simple array-backed queue with reactive superpowers. So let's get started. Make sure your Meteor app is running and that you have, for example, an empty app available like I do. If you haven't, then check out the first video in this tutorial series, because there we created also a new project and then removed all the boilerplate codes so that there's only a head and a body here and nothing else less. And then in the client folder, create a new file called ReactiveQueue. In the ReactiveQueue, we want to import tracker, because that's what fuels our reactivity. And then we export a class, and usually I use not a default class but normal class, so it's named, and we can use named imports. Then adding a constructor, and this queue uses an array as its underlying data structure. We could also implement this using a list, but that will be covered in a follow-up tutorial. And then we also need to create the new tracker dependency. This.dap is new tracker.dependency, and I explained in the last video how this actually works, or at least which of the functionality is important here. And I will simply continue. And there will be, enqueue. It's not so easy to write that. So that's the function to add a new item. And when we add a new item, then same as with stack, we push this item. And then we inform this.dap.changed. And then we want to return the new size. And then there is the other function, that's the dequeue function. And this function does not use pop like with the stack, because that would remove the last added item and return it. But we want to remove the first added item and remove it. So in order to get this item, we first check if the queue length is 0, because if that's the case, then we simply return null, because there is no item to get from the queue. And otherwise, we call this.queue.shift. That's the opposite of the pop function, removing the very first item in the array and having all the other elements move one step backwards in that case. And then we inform the tracker again that the dependency changed and return the item. Okay, and because we want to visualize the behavior, we also need the all function. And because this is an access function, we need to check if there is an active computation and call the observer for dependency. Then we return a shallow copy of this array by using array concat this.queue. That's already it. That's the queue implementation here using an array. Super simple, yet effective. And now we want to integrate that into our template. So we create a new queue template. Queue. And then there are two sections in that template. First one is the user input, and then the second is the list of all the items in the queue. Okay, so in the user input, we want to provide a simple text input, and then giving it the name item input, because we need to access it in our template logic but I will show you that in a minute. Then we need two buttons. One button to enqueue the item, and then one to dequeue the item. These are basically our inputs. So if I save that, then there should be on reload something. Yes, so you see there is the input and there are the buttons, but nothing happens yet. Okay, no problem. Then we want to iterate each item. Each item in items. This is basically the list we want to return for all items in the queue. And then each item is rendered /each. And for visualization purposes, I want to give it some inline style here. So border solid1 px hash 0, then margin 2px, simply to make it a little bit more clear. And then we also need to add the template logic. So we need to import the ReactiveQueue here, and then need to instantiate that one. So template.queue on created. That's the code for the template. And then we want to instantiate this, a new ReactiveQueue for this template. And then we need a help template. Sorry, something's weird. Okay, template.queue.helpers. And then we need to add the items helper, items, and that's the helper. Let me split that to make it more visual for you. That's the helper here in this line 19. Each item in items, that's what we want to iterate. That's basically all the items the queue can return. So we'd say template.instance.queue.all. And in order to make it look like the very same as in this graphic here, we also need to reverse it. So .to reversed. Why I'm using .to reversed? Because .to reversed will keep the original underlying structure and will not mutate the array, because mutations can be tricky sometimes. Even if we run a shallow copy here, simply being on the safe side. So, and then we need two events that add or remove items to or from the queue. So there's the first one, that's click.enqueue button. Yeah, that's clicking this one here, or visually this one. And what we want to do is we want to read from that enqueue button the current value. We do that by first we use event prevent default, because we don't want to submit a form or something and we don't want the website to reload. The first thing we do is we get the text from the item input here, and that's has a class item input attached. So we use that component $item equals instance.$, that's the instance internal query selector dot item input, and then we can extract the value from it. Value is item.val. It's the same syntax as jQuery does, because in Blaze there's still jQuery under the hood. But if you use React or Vue or Svelte or Solid, then you might know how to extract these values from your input usually. And I use Blaze in that example. So I have the value, and then I want to add this value to the template instance queue. So, and then I run instance.queue.enqueue the value. Okay, Let's save that and reload. And it looks like it worked. Okay, let's reload and let's see how that looks like in our example. 1, 2, 3. You see, the last one is always added to the last. And then if we dequeue, we usually want to remove this one and process it. So we need to implement it as well. But I think I should also clear the input here. So let's, after that, call $item.val null, clearing the underlying input. And then, of course, we want to run the dequeue function. So I'm simply copying that and then just rename dequeue and then remove all that and this here as well. And then having to call dequeue. Okay, looks fine so far. Let's reload that page. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, because 1 was added first, it will be removed first and of course processed first. And then the other one as well. And there it is. You've implemented a reactive queue, and now you can start sequentially process your client-side data, whatever you need, reactively. And with that, I wish you a happy coding time. Keep watching what we will publish, because there will be following up projects, follow-up videos, follow-up tutorials on more reactive data structures. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, so you will not miss any of these tutorials. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, then leave a comment. We are happy to get any of your feedback, your input. And if you liked it, of course, like the video. And with that, I wish you a happy coding time. Goodbye.